Hello and welcome to Loose Carry. This is Zero Tackles Weekly NRL podcast. If you're new here, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is a massive episode. Lachlan Galvin is heading to the Canterbury Bulldogs. We're breaking down all the action from round 12, including the Dolphins' massive win over the Bulldogs, and we chat to our guest, Jamie Soward, about State of Origin and what the players will be going through this week. It is a massive episode. Let's get into it. All right, and joining us as always for this episode of Loose Carry, Darren Parkin, Zero Tackle Analyst. How are you, mate?
Going very well. Big, albeit short week, and we gear up for Origin Game 1.
Absolutely exciting stuff. And as always, as well, Rugby League coach Lee Addison.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Oh, not too bad. You've made quite a stir on the Zero Tackle TikTok last week.
Why? What happened?
Oh, just a lot of comments, mostly picking on your accent. Why is this English bloke telling us how to run the rugby league?
Brilliant. As long as they don't accuse me of being on crack again.
And making his triumphant return to the podcast, Jamie Soward for Origin Week. How are you, mate?
I'm good. That's why I was called back in. Lee was getting a little bit too big for his boots, so I've been told to rein him in and get stuck into him ahead of Origin, mate.
Absolutely. All right, let's get stuck in. All right, so first thing on the rundown. So the big news coming out last night on Sunday evening. Lachlan Galvin to the Dogs, Darren.
Yeah, it does make for an interesting conversation, obviously, that released from the last 18 months of his contract. There was all the talk around it, the strong statement from the Tigers a few weeks ago when we first heard wind of it. But we know, obviously, the Bulldogs are right in the window. He's expressed an interest to play there. We've had, Gould and co come out and talk about that. I guess the interesting one, Sow, is how he'd get used. His best spot is the 6. The Dogs pretty well stocked there. They're thinking a 13 role. He's spoken in the past about some reluctance to do that, but also what it does for the likes of Sexton, who's out of contract, Burton, and those sorts of things. But certainly big news.
Yeah, it is huge news. I think for me, I'm glad it's kind of over for him because it's been such a long process, and both club and player have obviously on the nose of each other. So I think this is going to be Canterbury's biggest test of the year. If they can make this work, this could be a huge play and an X factor that they may need. I thought they had the material to win this year. I know we're going to talk about their game last week, but when you got guys like Bailey Hayward, Sexton, Burton, that combination seems to be working well when they're all fully fit. You bring a guy like Galvin in, he's not as structured. I think that's going to be the biggest question is where he plays. I actually think he'll come off the bench and play that sort of, maybe Sexton goes into 9, maybe he plays sort of that 40 minutes off the bench in the middle. I don't know, but that's going to be interesting and a big test for Cameron Ciraldo because you don't bring a guy like that in if you're not going to guarantee him a premium spot. You can't pay him whatever they're paying him, to try and experiment, especially when you're coming first on the ladder.
There's a lot to watch here for me because I think the Bulldogs have got quite a unique setup at the moment where they are truly digging in for each other the vast majority of the time. And I think you get that from time spent together on the training paddock, particularly in your pre-seasons, and they've gone through something of a metamorphosis over the years in terms of the style of player they brought in. And Gus's messaging has all been about we're building from within, and then all of a sudden they parachute someone in. And I think it can always go one of two ways. I mean, it's a risk that I think was definitely worth taking for the Dogs, because any critics of the Dogs style this year has been regarding, did they have enough strike power, wasn't it, Sally? So I think it's definitely a risk worth taking. But also, I bring you back to your 2010 Premiership year, Sally. How would you have felt if somebody all of a sudden was parachuted in mid-year if you were going well?
Well, Gaz was parachuted in, very similar. The fact that he'd been there, but you're right. I think you build a bond and a kinship within from when you start training in November, and they've been able to have the results that have reflected that. I think that the one thing about that, when you talk about a player coming in, you would have had to have some consultation with the senior players. You would have had to have some consultation around, okay, where does this guy fit? You're not, as much as we'd love to believe everything that they weren't planning and all that kind of stuff, there would have been some sort of discussions around, okay, if we did get him, where would we play him and how would that affect our style? And like I said, we're about to talk about their result on the weekend. He makes them a better side. I've got no doubt about that. Does he go off the cuff a little bit too much? Does he understand? Yeah, because now you essentially have got Matt Burton, who might play 7, and Lachlan Galvin, who might play 6. If it doesn't work out straight away, then that becomes, he's on the nose straight away. If he comes in, Galvin, and they lose next week against Parramatta and he doesn't play well, he's on the nose straight away. And Bulldogs fans will say, why did we get him?
He's also not the best defender, Phoenix. So, and the Bulldogs season up until maybe the last few weeks has been really built on the strength of their defence. So that will be an interesting dynamic too.
Question to both of you as the player. So I was going to say, Phoenix, as the player and the coach, how much do you consult if you're the coach and management? Do you go to the players and say, this is what we're planning on doing? Are you happy to make the necessary adjustments? Or do you just go as the coach, I think we can win a premiership if we do this, so we're just going to do it? How do you kind of see, I guess, from a coach point of view, Lee, do you just make the call or do you have to consult?
It all depends on how your team's travelling. I think if you're at the bottom of the ladder and not very happy with how things are going, then I think, and you're not very happy with some of your roster, then maybe you don't do that. But I think with the case of the Bulldogs, where everything's moving in the right direction, by all accounts, Cameron Ciraldo is the kind of coach that brings people together, that consults, that cooperates with others. I would be very surprised if that didn't happen, wouldn't you, Sally?
I think he would have had a meeting with Stephen Crichton and sat down and said, do we need this type of talent at our club? And the answer would have been yes. The big one is going to be Sexton. Yeah, that was the reluctance to sign him. What do they do with him now? So I think there would have been a conversation.
Yeah, so internally, we're saying that they must have a plan in place for him, right? Like, is Lachlan Galvin that good that you just bring him in because he's available no matter what? Or, they have to have a place for him to play, right? Sorry, that was at Lee.
I think it's always a risk mid-season. And I guess if you look at the messaging again, is this the Bulldogs saying we were never going to win the Premiership with what we had?
No. No, it's not. There's a top-line player in his position that's a generational talent that has come on the market that is not happy at a club. This is not any thing on Sexton or anything like that. When you get a chance to look at what the Roosters did with Cooper Cronk and Mitchell Pearce. Cooper Cronk was unhappy, wanted to come to Sydney for a lifestyle change. They moved on Mitchell Pearce, who was there forever, in a chance to win Premiership. They went back-to-back. They are in their Premiership window right now, the Bulldogs. They can win it this year as currently constructed. This gives them a little bit extra to play with. The big storyline is going to be, how it works and how their style changes.
Have you heard the rumour of Burton to fullback?
I've heard a lot of rumours, and I want to wait and see what that team list is like.
What would you do?
What would I do? You're the coach. I'm the player.
I thought you coached as well.
For me, right now, I think that I would stay as is, and I'd be bringing Lockie off the bench and trying to find his way around. Maybe he plays in the middle 30 minutes and we just see what he goes defensively. And I think that that's where he wants to get to. The other part that he might go in and start at halfback. And Bulldogs fans are going to have to be okay with that because you forked out a lot of cash to get him. And it'll be interesting to see how Gus handles it.
Yeah. So the flow-on effect of this too is we take a look now at Parramatta. They were eyeing off Galvin to replace Dylan Brown. So, Sowie, what do you think they do now? Who do they chase for their replacement for Dylan Brown?
Yeah, Parramatta have if I was Parramatta, I think you go to the neck to market and you find a young, up and coming ball running 5'8", who's not going to cost you 900,000. You're going to be able to get someone on 450, 500. Sanders Smith's come on the market the last couple of weeks. You've got guys around in the lower grades at every club that are vying for positions. I think that's definitely a prospect for the Parramatta Eels. The other thing is they're playing pretty well at the moment. I don't think you need to rush into anything. Don't go out and overspend right now. See how your team finishes this year. You might be able to get someone at the end of the year. But, I think that definitely they should go for a young 5'8", maybe a bigger running 5'8".
Yep, absolutely. So back to the Bulldogs. So again, this is all in the context of them coming off a loss to the Dolphins. Again, it's origin period, so they have a couple of things to, if you wanted to make some excuses for them, Sowie. They were missing a few players, but Bulldogs 8, Dolphins 44. Can you blame those sort of things for that loss?
Of course, there's an excuse built in if you want it. Knowing Cameron Ciraldo and the way that he's started his coaching career, I don't think he'd be buying into that. When origin players go out or representative players go out, I think we put too much focus on, they've got origin players out. For me, their attack definitely looked like it probably halted a little bit. They had all the right plays. I think, to give Lee a little bit of credit, when they play in the wet, do they have that change of gear to be able to go to a different style and beat you a different way where it's not on top of you, where it's not fast change direction? The other part is it doesn't matter. You've got 34 guys in your squad who know that defensive system and those defensive principles. That for me was the big talking point. The 44 Dolphins are a good side. They're not 44 points better than what the Bulldogs system should be. I was more disappointed in that if I was a Bulldogs fan.
It should have been easier for their defence to hold up with those changes. When if you think back to the last subject that we discussed, the culture of the Bulldogs, the DNA of the Bulldogs that's been built up over a couple of years now, that should have maintained in these circumstances. It won't do them any harm. I do think, Darren, if you look at it from a purely statistical point of view, it's possibly been on its way too, because the last 2 weeks they've conceded 20 points before coming back to beat their opposition. So you can't keep doing that, Darren, can you?
No, you can't. That's right. And I think on the players unavailable, obviously it was compounded by injuries, not just origin. But one of the stories of the weekend had been how players performed stepping in as replacements. And a lot of the wins were defined by that. You look at Parramatta's result minus Moses with Hawkins' effort and a few of those sorts of guys as well. I guess the Bulldogs, I know they had to cover a lot of those bases, but they didn't get that to the desired level. And, obviously not handling the wet conditions is something I'll want to address over the next 6-8 weeks if they cop that again. And but I think you're right that sometimes you're a little bit out of form. You win on character, but when you address the game afterwards, you're probably thinking, oh, gee, that was triumphant. We did this and this and this. And maybe some of the things that didn't work just get hidden a little bit until they slap you in the face, which is what's obviously happened to them.
I think also over the course of the year, everybody's looking at the Dogs. How do you break them down? And I think a few of the sides have worked out a bit of ball movement. I thought that the Dolphins, let's give them credit for this. They were outstanding. And their completion was high. But if you look at their tries in particular, it was all ball movement. Absolutely all ball movement. The old-fashioned, let's move the ball sideways, and then a little bit later on, when they're over-reading that, let's play back through the middle and put in the change of direction, coming back in on the angle. And I think that sides realise they can score tries against the Dogs, and they've worked out why. And opposition coaches always look for those things when a team is at the top and looking like pretenders for the title.
Yeah, I'm always a bit skeptical when it comes down to, as you said earlier, Darren, playing in the conditions. Both teams play in the same conditions, and both teams had players out for Origins. So we should give the Dolphins some credit where credit's due. What do we think of Isaiah Katoa? What's the limit on him? Because he's firing.
He's so good. His maturation over the last 2 years, Wayne having him in and out of sides has been so good to watch. And, if you were really looking at the Bulldogs, you would think they would have gone after Katoa versus Galvin. If a genuine seven who commands, the respect but understands the longevity of, manipulation of kick defense and all that kind of stuff. So, I love watching him grow up. I watched him play out at Penrith a couple of years ago in a semi-final. I think his first game of reserve grade, and he absolutely brained him. He's unfortunate that he's going to be in a class where Nathan Cleary and Mitch Moses for the next 5 years, most likely Jerome Luai, are going to be in the halves for New South Wales. But he's got a great future ahead of him. I love watching him play. He's probably my favourite player to watch.
If he was in New South Wales, he'd be in the paper every day. He'd be the next Nathan Cleary or the next Joey or the next Jamie Soward.
It doesn't have to be that.
I know. I agree.
No one's going to be the next Jamie Soward. Trust me. All right. This is a bit of a bed bug of mine. Like, Andrew Johns is top 2 halfbacks we've ever seen, top 3. And Jonathan Thurston, Nathan Cleary, like, he's in the upper echelon. He's an immortal. There's no one can do what Joey can do. No one can do what Nathan Cleary can do. Like, Isaiah Katoa is actually quite different. He's come out of the Penrith system, but he's very different in the way that he approaches it. Penrith and Nathan Cleary play off the back of Isaiah Yeo. Katoa plays off himself. He's first receiver, flat line. He's the distributor around the ruck. And I think that the Dolphins, for me, if they can get that mix right of the attacking flair and some more defensive resolve, they can make the 8. But I don't understand. Yeah, I've never been. I mean, I hate that he has to be the next. Like, we haven't seen some of the footballers play the way they're playing at the moment, and the game's completely different to when Lee was coaching versus watching right now. Darren as a kid, like, we were watching big bodies, slow movement, momentum, all that kind of stuff. Now it's flat, fast, at your football, repeat sets, 7 tackle sets, all that kind of stuff. Here's a 20-year-old kid who's adjusting to it the best style. I think he's got his own style.
Yep. And moving now to the Eels and the Sea Eagles. So Eels getting up 30-10, 20 points on them. So there's 2 things that come out of this one. One, Dean Hawkins stepping in for Moses, absolutely dominating. But Lee, on the other side of that, what is next for Manly? And is Turbo's best position actually fullback?
I'll answer that 1 second. The Seabold said in the press that they're very much lacking consistency, and I disagree with that because they're consistently average at the moment. They've lost 4 of their last 5. They conceded 30 in the last 2 weeks. They're well below the best. Indeed, I can't remember when they last were their best. I thought their defence in the middle was awful. They fell off so much. Luke Brooks had an indifferent night defensively too. One thing I've noticed, they actually do struggle after long trips as well. So there's something going wrong in their preparation and their recovery and their preparation that week because they had a big trip to Townsville the week before. So there's big question marks about the coach for me now. I'm not saying that he's necessarily under lots of pressure yet, but put it this way, the jury is still deliberating because I think they are genuinely not putting it together. In terms of Turbo, a fit, healthy, younger Turbo, absolutely a fullback. Now, with his injury issues and whatnot, Sowie, he looks a bit heavier to me now too. He may have to limit some of his involvement. He might have to play on one side of the field, maybe.
2 things. I think Turbo's injured and they need him to play through, so he's not 100%. The other part is I tipped Manly 5 weeks ago to miss the 8. When they went to Perth, that was their grand final against the Sharks. Since they've come back, they're 1-4. The consistency... To be fair, they've got some really strike players, and they've had some guys. I just don't think he's got his forward mix right. When they lost Paseka, Aloye, these guys were big workers for him last year. Ethan Bullymore the other night looked sensational. He hasn't started other than injury. They've lost Jake Trbojevic through concussion. So they've got injuries like every other club. I just think Tom's playing busted at the moment, but he knows that if he doesn't play, the pressure will start to build. I tipped them to miss the 8 5 weeks ago. My opinion hasn't changed.
What do we make of the debut for Papali'i coming off the bench? Pretty impressive on debut.
Yeah, great family, really good story. Joash, I think his first 10 minutes, I think he had a try involvement, then he let one in, and then he scored one. So it happened very, very quickly. But I love seeing debutants make it into grade. I love seeing the journey that they come in. He's got a lovely family. I know his dad really, really well. He's got a lot to do with the Samoan Rugby League. And it's just always nice. I thought he was great. He's probably a fullback. I love that he went on the wing and just gave it his best shot. He's going to be a bright future for him at the Parramatta Eels or somewhere else if he doesn't get a crack at fullback.
Yeah, it was a nice story. So, Darren, moving now to Panthers and Knights. Knights actually putting up a score this time and getting over the Panthers 25-6. So, is it time to write Panthers out at final contention?
Probably. Look, I mean, they had a good month prior where I think they'd picked up, 5 points in 4 games, 2 wins and a hard-fought draw. They looked like they were sort of turning the corner a little bit. Clearly, if you look at sides impacted by Origin, Cleary, Edwards, Martin, several others as well. But it puts them on the bottom of the ladder at the halfway point of the season. Now, I know they're a special case because of the 4 premierships in a row, but teams just do not play finals from there historically. Now, you'd argue that bad teams are usually on the bottom of the ladder in the middle of the year, and on paper, they're not awful. But, I think they're too good to finish bottom 4, but they've got too much work to do to make any significant inroads, I would think, in a pretty even season, Lee. It's there are mitigating factors this week, but clearly it's a season that they just can't catch up to. They've been chasing it the whole way through.
Absolutely. I think mathematically they can still make it, but I just think that there's a few issues there. Again, a side that's been built on defence. They missed 55 tackles this weekend, apparently. Brad Schneider had a real tough night, actually. They were directing a lot of traffic to him. I think Dylan Lucas ran over the top of him twice to score. I was calling him the lollipop man because he was allowing Newcastle to travel through their defence to the other side of the defensive line. So tough night for them. I think they had to keep winning. Sowie, I remember you saying a few weeks ago they have to keep winning at this point, and since then, quite frankly, they haven't.
I don't want to write them off. I just think the next 3 weeks they've got Parramatta, a winnable game this Sunday. That's their grand final. They always play well against Parramatta. They've got the Tigers they can win. They've got the bye. Then it starts to get a little bit murky. They've got a big couple of weeks where they play the Warriors and then the Bulldogs. So, look, if you're asking me right now, yes, but we've seen this champion team so many times win in different ways. The task is going to be big. Again, for me, and I know Lee will be as well, I want to see how Ivan Cleary manages this. I want to see how,
big test.
From a coaching point of view, he's passed the test. He's one of the greatest coaches of all time. He's won 4 in a row. But I just want to learn from him how he maneuvers this. And from me as a young coach, I look at how's he going to sell the story over this next 5 weeks? How's he going to get up to that level, and can they go on a run? That's the exciting part for me.
Do you remember, Sowie, when you won in 2010? How tough was it to back up in 2011?
Oh, you had everyone's best game every single week. And I think in 2011, I think we may have even started 8-1, 9-1. I think we lost 1 game, but we were just on a tear. And then as Origin came around, that's the big thing, right? Penrith have navigated Origin rep seasons Darren would probably know how many games Nathan Cleary's played from 2020 or Isaiah Yo's played from 2020 to now, and they'd be streaks ahead of other teams. So I think the big thing for Penrith is, I'll say this, if they win the Origin series, I reckon they can make the 8. if they lose the Origin series or they lose a game, I think they'll be up against it.
Because it'll bring back confidence, you mean?
Well, yeah, but once you win, like we lost game 1 in 2011, and I don't think we played that week. We had the bye, but game 2 we won on the Wednesday night, got on a plane Thursday, and were able to go up there and play Friday night, and we just lost to Brisbane, but it was like easier to play. It was easier to get up for it. So I don't know. Have you got those games, Darren? Like, it'd be interesting to see how many they've played.
In terms of extra games, so in finals alone over the last 5 years, they've played 16, and then obviously you factor in Origin. So it works out to be, in a 5-year period, you play an extra season. So as we worked it out, that when everybody plays 5 seasons, you've played 6. Now, I know that obviously there are Storm players and Sharks players that would also have similar numbers, but obviously not on the broader side of it like that. So, yeah, it does catch up with you. Speaking to a lot of players that have played in multiple finals campaigns, that you start pre-season a bit later than everybody else. It's obviously you're not going to complain because that's the path you would choose to take if you're successful in contending. But I guess just on that one, Lee, from a coaching point of view, obviously O'Brien was asked about the Knights at the presser and the United ship and whether they were all rowing in the same direction. Do you believe him when he says yes? I mean, obviously that's a good win, which suggests everything's all right. But do you think they are absolutely all reading from the same book?
It's a stay of execution for the fearless cat, Adam O'Brien. I call him a cat because he's had 9 lives already. In fact, I think he's had more. The pressure will be back on him this week if they don't beat the Dragons on Friday. So, again, when you talk about mitigation, you've beat the Panthers. Panthers weren't playing at home. They were in Bathurst. Also, Origin players missing. Some young players. There was a debutant scored a try. Hassett for Penrith.
Lee, just say it. Lee, just say it. There's no, unless Newcastle finish top 4 or win the comp, there is no way they can stay with what they're doing.
They can't.
We beat Melbourne. We were at the Dragons in 07 or 08. We beat Melbourne without their Origin stars, and no one even blinked because it was like they didn't have their Origin stars. They were at Bathurst. This is they were expected to win, Newcastle. And if they were in Sydney, I think a change would have already been made.
You think it's that close? You think it's that close?
Oh, mate. Like, for me, I look at Fletcher Sharp, the way he played on the weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way that, like, there's something. They knew that they were the better side going into that game. They knew they had some guys there they were going to test. They started really, really well. Dragons will beat them this week. Dragons will beat Newcastle this week.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean anything to me.
To answer your question, are they together? Doesn't look like they are.
Well, if you have a shit week and then you go out on Friday night and have a good night out, and then Saturday, Sunday is no good, the relationship's probably not any good, Lee. You probably should look around.
All right, we're going to stay with you, Lee, for the next game. So, Roosters 42 to Sharks 16. What did you make of this one? Savala in his 9th game dominating.
Air traffic control was alerted to the amount of Steedens going up in the air. There were a few tries came from kicks. Air traffic control were worried about these Steedens flying around in Gosford. And I think Roosters successfully used their taller wings, Dom Young and Tupou on the other side. What I took from that watching the game was how poor Sharks were. So, Sowie talked about the grand final a few weeks ago for Manly Sharks versus Manly Sea Eagles. This was possibly a great moment for the Sharks to really rubber stamp their Premiership credentials against the Roosters side that were missing a couple of players. On the flip side, though, I'm really excited by the Roosters at the minute. The players all played well. I think the other player that played well, Sowie, is Tedesco. I mean, he has gone on to another level again, hasn't he, this year, since he got rubbed out of Origin in game 2 and 3 last year.
Yeah, I don't know if he was rubbed out. I I just look at the Sharks. Again, I'll say it. I sound like a broken record. They could finish first. They could finish second. They could finish third. Their grand final comes up in September. They've been up the last couple of weeks. They've travelled, as much as anyone. They've had wins up in North Queensland. They beat Manly. They've come back. They beat the Melbourne Storm in probably the game of the year. And then they were due for a down week. Did we expect it to be to the Roosters without their origin stars? No, we didn't. Was there a bit of complacency there? Potentially. But again, when a team gets blown out like this, I look at the defence. You can get beaten on any day. The competition's the closest it's been in years, right? But when you get blown out by 40, I think when I was playing, that would be like, oh my goodness, they let 40 points in. Now 40's like the new 20, 24. Like it's not that big a deal because we saw the Bulldogs concede 40, the Sharks concede 40. I think Craig Fitzgibbon would be unhappy, but they have had a lot of games on the road this year, the Cronulla Sharks. I think they're due for a run of home games. I think that'll hold them in good stead.
Darren, I think we're approaching very soon, either this year, next year, or the year after, a team will concede 50 in a game and still win the Premiership.
They'd probably still win the game. Potentially, you'll end up with something. You'll end up with something like that. But it's becoming faster and more ballistic. That's for sure.
Yep, and last game of the weekend. So, Sowie, this one we flagged last week as a game of the round. Warriors and Raiders both flying. Warriors got off to a good start. Raiders came home in the end. What did you make of this one?
I've loved watching the Warriors this year. I've loved watching the Raiders a little bit more. They're gritty. I said last week on my podcast with Guru that there's 5 teams that know their identity in attack and defence, and it's really, really important to understand that. These are 2 teams that understand that. Their attack's probably not exciting inside the red zone. I think they could both improve that. I think the Warriors are 16th in terms of their red zone attack. I thought they needed more out of their halves yesterday. When the game was on the line, they had a lot of ball, 16-10, and they just couldn't find a way. They looked like they were out of answers. I think they could play more through Wade Egan. The Sharks did a couple of weeks ago through Blake Brayley and actually upset the Melbourne forward pack by playing off the 9 a little bit more. I think they can get more out of Wade Egan. But as for the Raiders, genuine premiership contenders. Smells a little bit like 2019 for me.
I don't think the Warriors can be too worried about losing the game by 6 points. I thought that it had a finals intensity in some ways because it was a full house. I think that both teams were a little bit nervous. No team wanted to lose that game, I don't think. And I thought the defences were very good. Both teams defended with guts, determination. They were scrambling well. I agree with Soward about the Warriors' attack, and again, the Raiders' attack isn't absolutely clicking all the time. And it will be hard, Darren, sometimes when you are losing the forward power, because as much as the game has changed, you still need people in the midfield dominating, and the Warriors were missing Fisher Harris and Mitch Barnett, and the Raiders were missing Hudson Young. So they probably lacked a little bit there in midfield, but they certainly made up for it, I think, with guts and determination.
It's one where you don't lose admirers too much if you get beaten, but I think we spoke about the Bulldogs come from behind win against the Raiders a few weeks ago and how some wins mean a little bit of something. And so for the Raiders, obviously, to beat the Warriors away, only team to have done that so far, and then obviously to beat the Storm in Golden Point and the Thriller as well, there are a couple of results that, and to lead the Bulldogs by, I think, 20, I think there's a few things they can take out of all of that, which gives them a fair degree of confidence for the campaign that, they can match it in the pressure cooker environments, which will serve them well.
What was worrying in that game, I thought the referee didn't have a great game. And one thing, Sally, I'd love your opinion on this about the crusher tackle. I have a bit of a theory that the old attackers are turning in the tackle and sort of falling into it on purpose just as much as the players in defence are trying to do a crusher tackle. And I think it's getting a little bit silly at times now.
Yeah, it is. It's really, really hard because as a defender, you've got a responsibility to provide a safe passage for them to get their neck through. It is hard when a person turns their shoulder and almost back into the defence. So, I have no doubt that we'll look at that in the off-season and see where that all sits. But the other one that's annoying for me is this advantage rule with a knock-on. Either bring the Super League rule in where you just have a free play or just have 10 metres upfield. If you go 10 metres upfield, you've got an advantage.
Also, a knock-on has to go forward, but that seems to have changed over the years too.
That changes week to week, mate.
All right, absolutely. Let's move on now to some contract news, Darren. So Adam Reynolds reportedly re-signing with the Broncos. Right call. He had some interest from the Tigers, but what do we make of this one?
Yeah, he openly admitted in a radio interview that he'd spoken to the Tigers. The number had been suggested beyond 700,000 on the open market. Looks like he's recommitted with a bit of a haircut on that to stay at the Broncos, who clearly got a salary cap squeeze that we've mentioned, which he also acknowledged. I believe that they're looking at things beyond his playing career, ambassador, assistant coach, that type of thing. But it does send a pretty good message, Sowie, I guess, to the rest of the group that, I know there's other aspects to it, but that he's prepared to take a little bit of a trim to maybe allow them not to lose too many others.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I love Adam Reynolds. I think him re-signing with the Broncos is a great coup for the club, but I don't think it fixes what's happening this year. There's a lot more. It's got its own podcast, that. But I think Adam Reynolds, he'll go down as one of the greatest halfbacks of all time. Such a great short kicking game, goal kicker. For me, plays above his weight. It's just going to be a matter of how it all works for Michael Maguire again as a young coach. How does he get himself out of this? How does it next year? How does it all work with the amount of hookers and what that looks like with Adam Reynolds and stuff like that next year around the spine as well.
Yep. And the other contract news, Lee, so officially signed, Bronson Garlick is heading to the Bunnies. So now 2026 you have Garlick, Brandon Smith and Peter Mamazelos. How do they all fit together?
Well, Garlick is 29, so this is a signing for the now. So he's going to be used next year. Obviously Smith can play in other positions in the pack as well. So I would assume that Mamazelos is maybe becoming surplus to requirements, or he might have to bide his time a little bit because he's the youngest of all those and might have a future elsewhere.
Yep. And before we get to the preview of Origin and the next round, so we have our mailbag. If you want to submit something to the mailbag to have these guys answer your questions, head to Zero Tackle on Instagram. So we've got one submission here from Villa Falefu. Sorry if I've pronounced your name wrong. I'll direct this one to Darren, so as the resident Storm guy. What do you think the Storm are lacking at the moment?
I'd be keen to get a coach's perspective, Lee, that they've been opened up a couple of times where they're a very strong group across the park, but when they've lost control of games this year, probably unlike previous seasons, they haven't been able to pull the handbrake and arrest momentum for whatever reason. But they've always been very good in the past at what you might call a red alert situation where they're under the pump and they can squeeze the opposition. It feels like they're not quite doing that at present.
There's been a few clubs that have been excellent at developing players, recruiting players that nobody else might necessarily look at, and staying resilient for long periods of time. We've talked about Penrith having potentially run out of some gas after 4 years of being at the top of the ladder. Sorry, 5, because they got to the grand final the year before. There's every chance that Melbourne, the Melbourne culture, if you like, or DNA, or whatever term you want to use, just might need some reinforcement again. Maybe it's taken 20 years for this to happen at Melbourne Storm. They think the same thing that we're talking about Penrith. The difference is they've not fallen too far, and it won't take much for them to get back. What's changed? What needs to change? I just think that you can't tip Melbourne anymore with the same certainty that you used to be able to, particularly at home. And that tells you something. I also think that every year, this Craig Bellamy might not be coaching for another year, next year. There's going to be a time when it's a bit like the Lachlan Galvin thing. We got fed up of that after 4 weeks. Well, this has been happening now for a few years at Melbourne. So I think we all know that something might change at Melbourne soon in the next year or two. So maybe there's something going on in the organisation there that people can't put the finger on. And maybe it's just knocking their performance levels down a little bit.
Yep. All right.
Sorry.
Yep. No, you go, Sal.
These two blokes are absolutely killing me. It's the Melbourne Storm. Have made the top 4 how many times out of the last 25 years? Have made the top 8 how many times? They are fine. They are fine.
We love it. We're going to stay with you, Sal. So we have, of course, the Origin superstar himself. It would be remiss to not take this opportunity to ask a few questions about what it is like. So we're, 2 days away now by the time this goes up. We've got, I know you don't want to talk about Queensland, but they've got 3 debutants. How would they be feeling? But then we also have Payne Haas, who's under a little bit of an injury cloud. We'll know by the end of today whether or not he's going to be playing. He just needs to get through training today. But yeah, what is the feeling like for a player this close to Origin game 1?
Yeah, I think I got to make my debut at the Cauldron, so I was very excited. You go out today, you have a look at the ground. Tomorrow's captain's run out there. It's very short, very sharp. And then you're just pretty much getting ready for the game. All the work's done ahead of what's going to be a cracker on Wednesday night. I think both these sides match up closer than what we actually think. Some of the battles, Rabbitohs v Latrell Mitchell, for me, is must-watch TV. I think the halves as well. Cameron Munster and Daly Cherry Evans have been there a lot before together and won series together. Mitchell Moses, Nathan Cleary, first time they've played together. So right now you're relaxed, you're taking it easy, you're enjoying it because you know that the last 6-7 days has been enjoyable with a bunch of guys that you're getting ready to go into battle with.
So on that, in terms of when you come to actual game day or game night, what were you like? You're playing at night in a high pressure game, high intensity. Do you try to completely block football out of your mind all day, go for a walk, play video games, do whatever? Or do you do some sort of game visualization or just try to keep it completely away?
We go for a team walk. So I think on Wednesday morning, usually you'll go about 9, 10 o'clock, go for a team walk, hang out for maybe an hour, and then your prep actually goes really, really quickly. I know that sounds, you play at 8 o'clock, but it goes really, really quickly. By the time you get back, have lunch, have a bit of a stretch, have a nap, wake up about 3 o'clock, you're sort of ready to go. So for me, I was pretty much OCD. I love to prepare the same way, and I'd gone into Origin with that same mentality that I wasn't going to change things. And you enjoy the 8 o'clock kickoff because you get a chance to really, be ready to go come sort of 6 o'clock. So I didn't really alter too much, but nice and easy on game day. Very, very relaxed environment. Some guys like to play PlayStation. Some guys like to read, watch movies. Usually you get a movie in there, which is good.
What was the movie that you usually watch?
Oh, mate, I watched a lot of movies. It was whatever we didn't have to pay for, really. I didn't want to pay the $16.95 or whatever it was in the hotel. Lee probably paid a little bit extra for the other ones, but
I was just going to say,
I didn't. I wasn't much of a. I just liked my routine. I had to sleep, wake up, music, write my notes. I didn't go much into the game visualization, Darren. I tried not to play the game before I got out there. But one thing I did do in 2011, because of floods of Queensland, we had to actually warm up in the demountables out the back. So for me, once I put my boots on, I'm boots on. Grand final day, we warmed up inside, boots on for me, whereas the other guys wore joggers. So they actually had to get a strip of fake grass to put out the back because I like to have a kick and warm up fully so that when I go out onto the field, essentially, I'm fully warm. I didn't need the warm up. I was more out there to catch and pass with my teammates, but they had to get some fake grass because I'd already had my boots on. I couldn't walk around in the cement.
So does that game day routine change? Like, I know you said you were OCD about it, but does that change between Origin and a regular, NRL home and away season game?
The only thing that would change is the timing around it all. I think Origin, I was never, I was told it was amazing to run out on the Suncorp or Lane Park. And when you did, you just try and enjoy it. Yeah, you were there because you'd essentially earned that spot. And you were going out there to perform. So we lost 16-12 in the game. I think Slater scored on an inside pass from Lockyer in game 1, and then we won game 2. And game 3 was sort of over before it began. They blew us away in the first 20. We lost 34-24. So game day routine wouldn't change for these guys. They're so professional right now.
Sowie, a lot of the media talk has been that there's been no media talk because of a couple of New South Wales players not doing any talking at all. I think Queensland have been very quiet, and I think there's plenty of conjecture about how Moses and Cleary will play and which side of the field they'll play and whatnot. When you played Origin, and in general, how much did you listen to what the newspapers were saying, social media was saying? How did and did it? If you tried to stop, did it still get to you anyway?
I was lucky that social media wasn't a huge thing when I started, and when we won the comp, it wasn't. It was sort of, I think Instagram and that had sort of just started to come out and get ready. So, but I knew who wrote stuff about me. I knew who the so-called experts who came out and judged my game, and I knew who they were, and I had I've probably still got a lot of bad blood with them, and I've called them out. Now that I work in the media, I've gone face to face and I've called them out, and they're like, "How do you remember that?" I said, "I just remember. I remember the girl that wouldn't date me in high school." I mean, that's just some of the stuff that
well,
I'm a Scorpio.
There's that many that you had to keep a list.
Well, they seem to find their way back when you started making first grade, Lee. So, but no, I think the ones that the thing for them, for us right now is, I think we're so excited about the competition that we're kind of waiting for another story instead of just going how good Origin is. Yeah, Origin's its own product. For me, Kalen Ponga v Dylan Edwards. Kalen Ponga's potentially, there's talk that the talk won't go away that he's leaving the Knights. If he gets into camp and meshes with one of these guys in camp, what does that do? Can Stephen Crichton, carry on his form against Hamasai Tabuai-Fidow in that position? There's Cherry Evans. This is really the ultra redemption for Cherry Evans. Can he get it over Nathan Cleary, who's the best halfback in the game? Tino Fa'asuamaleaui versus Payne Haas, if that happens. We don't have to look for stories all the time. They're all there. We just want to focus on the big ones. If you go in deep dive and you look at some of the matchups there and some of the storylines of actual footy stuff, you can find it. But we just want the ones that are going to sell papers.
Yep, love it, Sowie. So that'll wrap it up for the Origin stuff. Let's take a look now at round 13. We'll go around to everybody. What game are you keeping an eye on? So, Lee, let's start with you.
The big game's Roosters versus Raiders, for the same reason that Cronulla and Roosters was a big game and Warriors and Raiders was a big game last week. But also Manly versus Broncos. They've both been going through a tough time. Penrith and Para is now a bit more of a basement battle these days. So there's the 3 games I picked out. But Roosters v Raiders, the big one.
That's the one that
Darren?
jumped off the page at my end as well, sort of having a look through it. South Warriors, the Warriors hit back to a mini little banana peel fixture for them. They would expect to win that. Their record in those matches has been all right. So, keen to see how they measure up in that contest.
How about you, Sowie?
What Lee said, Knights Dragons. If Knights get blown out at Oakey, the old Oakey Jubilee, by the Dragons fresh off a bye, I think that there's a little bit of a storyline around the Tigers. They've said that they're happy to put this bed now. They should go up and beat the Cowboys, I reckon. And then you've got the Broncos, Seagulls. Sunday might be the best Sunday footy schedule we've had. Rabbitohs, Warriors. Warriors, can they bounce back? Penrith, well, that's the Western Sydney derby. But, yeah, the Roosters, they've struggled for consistency this year. If they're going to make the 8, this is a game at home, Sunday night. They should win.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps it up for this episode of Loose Carry. Darren, you'll be around Zero Tackle as always. Lee Addison, I don't have your book on hand, sorry.
Don't you worry, plug. Phoenix. I brought my own. There it is, the best rugby league coaching book for at least 2 decades, right there. Available on Amazon or rugbyleaguecoach.com.au and all good bookshops. Where's yours,
That's
Phoenix?
Your best plug. It's somewhere. It's still not signed. And Jamie Soward, you're going to be at Marrickville for Origin.
Yeah, busy week. I'm at the Marrickville pub on Wednesday night. Origin Thursday night. The girls looking for a clean sweep, the Blues, and then Sunday afternoon footy at Combank. Caller for 2GB.
Mate, all over the shop. I'll get some sleep, I reckon.
No sleep, mate. No sleep.
Beautiful. All right, exciting weekend coming. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, and we'll catch you next week for the breakdown of everything that happened in Origin Game 1. Thanks, fellas.